All right.
Oh my God.
Good job.
Call to order a special meeting of the Salem School Committee for Monday, November 4th, 5 p.m. in City Council, in School Committee chambers to discuss proposal relative to the middle school grades at Salem Stall. We have one member who may be participating remotely. I don't know if she's joined us yet, Member Miranda. Otherwise, I think I'll open it up. Superintendent, you had presented, I think, your initial presentation last meeting regarding the recommendation and the reasons. If you want to add anything or reiterate any points
Yeah,
from that.
good news is there is not another PowerPoint presentation. I made my recommendation last week, or last meeting. I did send you a lot of data related to the survey, surveys we collected from staff, students, and from parents, and those closed Wednesday of last week, so there might have been additional results that have come in, but I did not send them to you. And I have forwarded you all the emails I've received, also from community members. I think everyone I received I forwarded to the school committee. And I've also, I'm very grateful that the two middle school principals are here tonight, Principal Sophic from Collins and Principal Jellison from Salem Stall, just to answer questions that I know I will not be able to answer related to details to their schools and programs that I think committee members might have. And so I think the purpose tonight was to have a discussion, for the committee to have a discussion. I've obviously looked at these results and have had a lot of discussions internally about this move. I still think that it's the right recommendation for the Salem Public Schools and for middle school students. But I do know that the committee wanted ample time to have that discussion. I also placed it on the agenda for the regular meeting in case there was public comment, so people could provide public comment. And if the committee wants to discuss it later tonight as well, but I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
So I have some questions, but rather than go first, I'll open it up to new members that might want to follow up on the data that was shared or ask any more questions.
I have thoughts, but I'm interested in hearing people's questions first, if there's more information that we can get.
Okay. So I just had a couple of questions, reflecting on some of the feedback from the meetings and the notes that were provided to us. There's some questions about whether the SALTS students going to Collins, if they could be grouped together. I don't know if that's...
Well, and Gavin, feel free to jump in, or Beth Ann. I don't think it's a good idea to group all students together, just like we do when students move up to the high school. We integrate students. They are likely going to be with some peers from Salem Stall, but we want to integrate the students so that they can meet new people, make new friends. That would be just like we do when fifth graders also come up to sixth grade from the different schools. We don't purposely group them. We integrate them depending, some of it depends on their service model and the supports they require in school. So we wouldn't strategically be grouping them together.
Could I just add to that? I think there are very, very rare, but very real situations where it would be in the best interest of a student to have a student in the same cluster or whatever they're going to call it, due to the supportive relationship that may have been established earlier in the elementary grades. There is a precedent for that in the past at the middle school, and I just would throw out the idea that it was always based on teacher recommendation, the teacher, and in many cases the special education teacher. It was not based on parent request at all. They were simply not considered. It had to come from staff.
I was sitting there, but they're going to participate, so I don't know if you want your back to
I
them.
probably want to see them. Good folks, thanks, BA.
And really out of, we had times had grade, numbers in a grade of 440, 430, and there might have been 3, of those requests. It was rare, but it is helpful sometimes.
On that point, I think, one of the, just from reading the student responses, the kids are so mature, so it's like they're so honest. I'm nervous. Some of them are excited, some of them are nervous, they have all different reactions. But the overwhelming sense that I got was that, like, whatever happens, they're going to be fine, because their answers are so thoughtful about what we can do to help them make the transition. So even though I understand that, like, when you're making the transition from 5th to 6th, do you really want to kind of integrate kids and give them a whole new experience? I do think this is pretty unique. So if, we end up taking a vote to, shift everybody out of Collins Middle School, I do think that would be it would be appropriate to keep some groups of SALT's kids together with that recommendation from teachers and special ed teachers and school counselors to say, this is, if we're going to keep 4 kids here and 4 kids there. I think that would, overwhelmingly, the kids said that, and I think that's a support measure that, for this unique circumstance, we should think about.
I think, can I just go back? I think we should think about letting that up to the school administration, that we not actually as a body get involved in saying that, that's a practice. Like,
The only reason why I would push back on that a little bit is that we did ask the kids for their perspectives, and I think that was a reasonable, not for the 5th to 6th graders who are, who might go out, who are going to go out anyway, but that one I think that was a good recommendation from them, and so I think that is the place where it is that ends up being our job to make that recommendation.
I would just push back a little bit again. That I think the kids did make their point, and they, and I agree with you, but I don't think it's a school committee, policy level, because, I mean, sometimes we make decisions and make a policy because we say, well, if you're not here in 4 years, if Steve's gone, I mean, we've said that several times on different issues. We have to make sure but this is a one-time thing, and we know the 2 people involved. It's Beth Ann and it's Gavin. So, I mean, I would say, stay out of it, but trust that these are the 2 people who are going to do the right thing for those kids, because we know they're 2 principals who do the right thing. And, if we were doing this every year, I'd be maybe leaning to agreeing with you, but I don't think we need to worry about it, because there they sit.
Can we ask them?
Yeah.
Okay, because as Mary was just saying that, I was just thinking, like, I guess I can see a situation where you have a kid who maybe has some serious behavioral, improvements that he or she or whomever needs to make. And so maybe the recommendation would be, I think this kid needs a totally different peer set when they get to Collins. Like, that might be a thing. Like, could that be, where maybe you don't want to keep anybody together.
Could I just clarify?
Yeah.
I was not talking about situations of behavioral issues.
No, I'm just thinking of a situation where Beth Ann might say, this individual kid needs something different, and to not be with anybody,
Yeah,
whether
but
that's
I don't want to put it on
anything.
them to say,
Yeah.
they're going to put it on a kid to help take care of another kid's behavior. It was other supports.
Well, it could be that too.
But, sorry?
It could be that too. That could be a thing.
It depends on how deep you define it, behavior, but I just want to clarify.
Yeah, I get that.
I think,
I just think that, we know our kids, we're really small. I mean,
Yeah.
We're only talking 140 kids. And I think that, there are some kids that I definitely can see calling Gavin and saying, you gotta keep this kid with this kid. But I think that if we're gonna go, we really need to spread them out, because we are really small. And some of these kids have been together for a long time. It would be nice for them to separate.
I guess I would just offer from a historical perspective, members of this committee that were a part of the last time we diffused students across the district, that I think we did school-based management left it to folks. The folks at the district did mention what supports were in place for students as they transitioned. And then I think the thing that we can put in place is just have a report back feature that ensures that the district has to come back to us to ensure that they're telling us what's happening from a school-based data level, with students being integrated back. But I think the second a decision gets made, students are at Collins, they become Collins Middle School students. But as a committee, we can come back from a governance perspective to take a look at any data, any tweaks, any lessons learned about how we integrated the two middle school communities. And I think we can put an expiration date about when we want to see those transitions. So, we could put it out for a year. I think that's what we did for when we closed Bowditch, or we could do 2, just given that it's middle school grades, and there might be more to learn, so.
We did, and people did give us that information. It was, that was carried through. It wasn't something that was on paper, we're gonna get, I mean, it actually consistently happened, and it was helpful.
Yeah, I think we had like maybe 3 cows to talk about the integration, and then a full data presentation. So if we could replicate something similar, Steve, Kate, I think we'd lean on you to take some of those lessons learned from when we diffused the students at the Bowditch and bring that back to the committee wherever we land on this.
Yeah, I don't know if we need that many meetings for it, though. We're talking about transitioning students to one school, same throughout the district. So
Not suggesting 3, just a similar cadence. Definitely not 3 meetings.
Yeah, no, because, I mean, remember, that was the entire school,
Yeah.
Kate at the whole.
That's right.
Right.
And they went to multiple schools, so that was much more complicated.
Complicated.
Yeah.
other questions from members? I have one other question that I wanted to. So I had a question. Some of the remarks from the parents was related to transportation. Has there been an analysis of the transportation impacts? Cost-wise, or also for children who currently walk to Salem, take the bus now? Do we have capacity on our buses?
Right now, there is some capacity, there is capacity on the middle school buses. I do think a lot of the kids that, it's tough to know whether they qualify or not. We haven't done an analysis of the kids who are at Saltonstall right now, and how many of them would qualify for mandatory ridership. There is capacity on the buses. I don't know that we might have to add an additional bus, but I'm not 100% sure. I know that is a big concern of the parents there, because many of them have chosen to live in that neighborhood so that their child can walk to school, whether it's elementary or middle, and many would not just because they live in that neighborhood does not mean that they would qualify for mandatory ridership. So there would be kids that would, would be asked to walk, and I know that that's for some of the parents that's going to be that's going to be a concern. That is the one pause I do have. But again, we have many kids who walk to Collins from that neighborhood. It's just that for many of the families who live right around the corner from Salt's, it's going to be a much longer walk to school. We can do an analysis about how many of the 140 kids would be.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think it would be worth it.
Yeah, we could do that, yeah.
When we're saying
We could call Vanessa,
140,
but yeah.
so we're 140 is the kids moving up to 6th, up to 7th, up to 8th.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm sorry, the 140, it's a little more than 140. But it is, I think the numbers I just sent you were like 49, 48,
So
and
it's
47.
Grade 6 is 47, grade 7 is 48, and grade 8 is 49.
And that's the present?
That's the present.
Not the ones moving
Yeah.
up.
So I'm sorry, what's 6th?
47 students. Grade 7 is 48 students.
Is that accurate, Beth Ann?
Grade 8 is.
That's what I have here, so yeah.
Well, the grade 8 students
Yeah.
Yeah.
are out.
I don't know
So,
if you didn't agree.
so how many 5th graders are there?
I can tell you right now.
52.
And we don't know how many of those kids would be going
No.
to Salts anyway. If it's based on the past years, it's 26 of those 52.
Yeah, it's 50.
I like that I just did math, like I knew how to do math.
So it's 52,
I
40.
said that super confidently.
Grade 7 is 48, grade 6 is 47, and grade 5 is 52.
It is.
I think when we do the analysis of the transportation, and
20.
we consider maybe as a transition that some students do get bused, but I think we have to watch that we don't like fall into fall in that everybody then starts getting a bus from the point. Because, and I know the gentleman got mad at the forum the other night not mad, maybe mad, but he came back and said, I said, kids have walked from Salton School to Collins, from that neighborhood to Collins, all the time, for years and years and years and years and years. And he was, I don't care about the history of that. I want my kids to not walk. And, you know, I think we have to watch out what we do with this question, because all of a sudden, if we do transport kids who would be walking here if they came here anyway, you know, if they weren't at Salts, then where do we stop that? Then they, you know, till they graduate, till if they're coming in the 6th grade, then we let them get a bus, and the kid who lives next door doesn't, because they didn't come from Salts, they came from Bentley or whatever. You know, I think there's I don't mean in a mean way, a slippery slope here, but I think we have to be careful of how we do this and look at it.
Can I just clarify one thing here? When you say where the cutoff is, are you suggesting that if we have this discussion, we look at the data and we decide we want to implement something temporary around transportation to address concerns about folks that made a choice based on their proximity, are you saying that you would cut it off at a particular grade? So like, you'd do this for the 3rd through 7th graders, you wouldn't do it for the kindergartners that are currently at Salts, right? Because that, I mean, folks made their choices.
Oh, actually, what you mean, I was gonna say, I'm not thinking grade, I'm thinking, I get what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm not thinking grade, I'm thinking time, but you were saying the same thing.
Well,
I was saying
because
like, how
families
many
choose,
years,
right,
and
in
you're saying what
kindergarten.
grade would you go back
Yeah.
to
I
keep
just want to
on?
know what you mean by cutoff. Is it?
You know, I'm looking after a year.
Is it
I'm
grades?
looking, you know, maybe a year. That's it. I mean, you know, why would we keep doing it, you know, for 2 or 3 years when everybody else is trudging, you know, through the puddles? You know, I mean, I don't want to keep it up, but I can see that a year's, you know, grace to let people, you know, settle in, get over it, you know. You know, there's no rational, practical reason that somebody who lives on a street in the point that doesn't get bused now is going to, you know, when the person next door isn't. But I can see it's sort of they're walking to the thing, and it's what all the 5th grade parents go through, but they're just going through a little later, you know? But, so I don't want to be totally, forget it, we don't care, but I don't want to be, in 3 years, still paying for kids to walk from Prince Street to Collins, when everybody else on Prince Street is walking from Prince Street to Collins.
Thank
And
you.
I don't even know if Prince is in the cutoff, I'm just saying a street.
It's a helpful clarification.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, I think, and part of it is like, one of the parents' comments was, because it sort of hit me, was something about, you know, I don't want my daughter or my child to leave the neighborhood school. And, you know, when they're thinking of it as a neighborhood school, and it's not, you know, so part of that, I think, is gonna have some people thinking, well, if you're making my child not go to the neighborhood school, then you better give him a bus ride. You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that this is gonna come up as an issue. And I just wanna make sure that we're ready to, you know, deal with them all.
I think we have to have faith in our children that they can get themselves from point A to point B, right?
We
'Cause
do.
Every family from every elementary school has to figure out how their kid gets to Collins. We live close to the Willows, and we have found people to carpool with. Like, there's ways around it. He walks every day. I think the important thing is making sure that we can make our streets safe. Like,
This-
during school hours, having crossing guards at the intersections, making sure kids get across, and maybe having the no turn on red. Like, if you're not looking for, it's our responsibility as adults to watch out for children.
The difference, though, is the parents who are looking for the transportation
I understand,
picked
but
Salt and Stall, so
Right.
they wouldn't have to deal with, you know.
Right,
And
but-
that's a little bit different than you or somebody else who lives on, Victory Road or whatever, and
Yeah.
you knew from the beginning,
Well, we also did
and-
Horace Mann too.
And see
so-
that, yeah, but I mean, you knew you would, and the parents that are mad at the forums
Right, I understand that,
are
but we
like,
can't pay
you
for
are
everybody to
making
go
us
to
have our
get a
kids walk,
bus.
and it's a little bit different.
No, I'm just being realistic, like,
Oh, yeah, I
we've
agree with you
become
100%.
a society that makes everyone else responsible for getting our kids places, when it's actually, we have the children. You choose your schools, yes, it's a small group of kids, it's not that unsafe of a walk.
Mm-mm.
But I get wanting to have a bus to school, but there are other ways, like, let's get back to community-based. Like, if you need help getting your kid to school, why don't you ask a friend? It shouldn't be.
There are ways to do that, that's like those,
But then you're gonna have
bicycle
that every
things
year
and-
after salts, they're gonna want a
Yep.
bus. So
that's what
do
I'm
you-
afraid of.
Right.
So that's a family engagement piece around whatever vote we end up taking. So I think we did a lot of great welcome activities. I think even when we changed the transportation policy, we did a lot of communication out to parents about what these changes meant.
Yeah.
Folks did community-based things. They set up walking groups for their kids, carpooling, et cetera. So we have the playbook and the template. I just think from a communication standpoint, we just would have to have things ready to go to talk about what the shift will mean for kids from that community, so.
One thing that I heard when we did move outage, because it was not too long after I had retired, but I still knew a lot of the people at the middle school. And one of the concerns I remember hearing a lot was how angry the 8th graders were that they were moved, that they had lost their 8th grade year. And that was one of the most difficult things for the staff here, because they were trying to deal with that anger, while at the same time just deal with the logistics of everybody moving in. But I didn't ask them lately, I don't know a lot of them now, but at the time, I remember how difficult they had with that whole year, dealing with the 8th graders who were angry the whole year. I don't know. I mean, Beth Ann will know how your 8th graders are gonna feel and stuff, but I just wanna throw that out as something that I remembered when this whole conversation started to come up. I remember those conversations.
Yeah, it's hard because the literature is pretty clear that school closures end up having like a psychological impact on kids that follows them for a period of time. The bounce back is real, right? Like they end up
Yeah.
bouncing back, but they're gonna hold on to that experience without question. So
Yeah.
it is about what supports we provide for students
Yeah.
that are maybe acting out one day because
Yeah.
they ran into this. But I think between the integration, City Connects, the relationships that folks are gonna know, we have a lot more systems in place that would help the kids with that kind of transition.
Yeah, I think the pre-transition process is important there, because
Mhm.
just reading the feedback from some of the comments, both from the students and from the parents, there's a lot of fear about this, like Collins being a big school and in their mind an unsafe school. It's just, I think, having the opportunity to bring them up here and see what this environment's actually like. I was mentioning before the meeting started, just reading some of these comments, it feels like there's a lot of reaction to what the perception of Collins was several
Mhm.
years ago, and not what is actually the
Yeah.
experience now. Speaking as somebody whose child just went through the school, that I don't see my personal experience in Collins reflected in some of the fears that are expressed in this feedback. And how can we address that so when the kids come up here, they're not feeling upset about it.
Yeah.
They understand that this is actually
We
a
talked
really
a
great
little,
school.
we talked a little bit about that at one of the forums, the one at Salts.
Mhm.
And I asked the parents, I said, we need you, if you're afraid or you're whatever, to keep that down and to instead act supportive, provide support to your children if we do this, and not, enhance the kids. Kids are gonna have a little anxiety, but if the parents are wreck, it's just gonna make the whole thing worse. We have to have some support. But the comments, you're right, I mean, there are a lot of them that, my kid transferred and I really like the school and blah, 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 but then the word horrible does keep reappearing in the comments. You know, and that could be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years, you know, but.
It really struck me how similar a lot of the comments were to some of the things that the Sachs population will say about Collins.
The what?
The Sachs population will say about Collins. The sort of myths about Collins were like concerning to me. That there are members of our public school community who believe that the students are better at SALTs, that the families are more productive at SALTs, that there are fights every day at Collins, that bullying is out of control at this school, that the class sizes are smaller at SALT and SALT.
That's a myth.
All of that stuff is being perpetuated inside of that school community and has nothing to do with this building or the experience that families are having here. Which is not to say that some families don't have terrible experiences here. Of course, kids have good and bad experiences everywhere, but that was really frustrating to me, again, as a parent who just went through this at times where it wasn't great. 6th grade was not the best year. 7th was a little bit better, and 8th was actually a really great year. And by all accounts, students are really having a good experience this year at Collins, particularly with the reimagined middle school experience. So that's going to be a lot of work, I think, undoing the narrative that has been perpetuated by families over at Salt and Salt. That is really concerning to me.
And staff.
Yes, it's.
I heard that, but the staff, I mean, out of the 27 staff members who filled this out, 23 of them.
About 20 of them, yeah.
23 are in support of
Yeah.
pulling the plug right away.
now, yeah.
3 are not, and 1 is sort of neutral. I think parents need to hear that at SALTs overwhelmingly. The teachers in that building believe that the middle school is not serving kids and that we should not have it anymore. That's a really compelling argument.
When you talked about the mystique, I'll say is a word of SALTs being better through the years, that's when I was adding staff. The staff all through those years, totally, and some of them are still out there doing that, who aren't even here. But I mean, I don't know how you really beat that. I mean, the list of things that were read at the podium the other night that Salt and Salt did first, and other middle schools, i.e. Collins, don't do, was so inaccurate. Odyssey of the Mind, which became Destination Imagination, here years before. National Honor, here years before. Drama Club, you know, I mean, the list could go on. At least, I don't know, probably half of that list was started here. But the myth is they're the only school that do it, and, you know, and if we by chance do it at Collins, it was after that they started it over there.
So I think part of the process
You know.
of potentially transitioning these families is helping them understand that those programs are here.
Mm-hmm.
That this is a safe school that you can have an excellent experience with. I had asked superintendent to provide some data that I think speaks to a little bit of the comparison. So the panorama survey on student engagement, percent favorable in this school year. In the past school year, was 19% at Collins, 11% at Salts. Chronic absenteeism was 16.5% at Collins, 24% at Salts. Middle school, out-of-school suspensions was 1.9% at Collins and 5.9% at Salts. 67 is the number at Salts compared to 40 at Collins. So I think that for families that are concerned about the trajectory of the Collins Middle School and the safety of their kids and the experience they're going to have here, I want them to know that both the qualitative data as a parent of a former Collins student who's now at Salem High School, and also the quantitative data, I think both we consider the metrics that we want to look at for this doesn't indicate that this is a school that you should be fearful of.
Yeah.
And then you factor in the gossip on the sidelines at soccer. I mean, the reality is that's who people listen to.
Well, we changed the narrative.
Huh?
We changed the narrative with what we put out in our what we talk
We
about.
we could
Like,
put
it's-
it out, I'm just saying,
But you can change public opinion by speaking highly of, like, you know, I was nervous about my son coming here. He's had, you know, ups and downs, but for the most part, it's been super supportive, which I would prefer. Like, I'd rather him have ups and downs and know that I have the support of a team behind me as a single parent
Mhm.
without anyone to turn to, and have them be like, no, we got you through, we can help you through this, it's okay, it's not just your kid, right? And I feel like we can do that with this. Salt's coming into Collins is only gonna add to the family, right? Like, we're all gonna support them. The kids are gonna support them. They're all friends outside of school anyway.
right? they know
I
each
think
other.
it's the adults that are scared. I
It
don't
always
really
is.
think that the kids are, I think the kids are all right. It's us.
always the adults.
It's us.
But, and the kids said that, there were kids
Yeah,
who were
they
like,
did say it.
I'm nervous, I don't wanna go, it'll be fine, a lot of my friends are at Collins, that came up a bunch, like, I know all those kids, and, you know, one kid said, well, what can we do to make the transition better, and it was like, I don't know, I know the building already, it'll be fine, you know,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like
They're playing sports here on the weekends. They
yeah,
know the building.
it's not quite, like, of course they're nervous,
Yeah.
and I do wanna, I really thought that their feedback was really great about, like, let's have meetings. You know, a lot of the kids are like, make sure you communicate with my parents a lot about what the programs are, about what the school is like.
Talk
Maybe
to me,
yeah,
talk to me, kept coming up
yeah,
all the time.
yeah, just like, they're crazy smart, you know,
Maybe you do an open house, like, we just did the CT open house on Saturday, and it was run by kids. It was amazing, and those students speak so highly of the programs. It was
Yeah.
really an honor to, like, go in and watch and hear all about it. Like, you could do that here with students. You have great ambassadors that
Yep.
talk about the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I just also point out, like, I have a lot of faith in Beth Ann Jellison as a principal, and I know she loves middle schoolers, which I don't know what that says about her, but she's grown to love them coming from elementary. But I also know how hard they have to work to just keep it together. Because, you know, we've had many conversations, you know, obviously it was a decision that I made, and with Beth Ann's blessing to move her there, I think she's an accomplished principal in Salem, had a track record of success. And in my conversations with her, just how she's always asking for resources. That's Beth Ann in general. But I think it's because they're working really hard to keep it all together there. And they don't have what Collins has to be able to give middle schoolers everything they need. And it's not because of the people there. It's not because of the lack. I think there's a really talented group of energetic folks there right now. There have been great teachers there, but it's much harder to replicate what I think a middle schooler needs right now in 2024. I can't speak to 10 years ago. I can't speak to, I don't know what the schools were like here pre-pandemic, but right now, they're working as hard as they possibly can to I don't want to say scotch tape, but they're doing the best with a minimal set of resources that here is just part of the way it's structured. And yes, Gavin has done a great job leading this school, but you know, even if Gavin weren't here, this is a school that offers just so much to so many kids. Just the services, Beth Ann and I have been talking recently about multilingual learning services. As new kids come in, we have to do somersaulting to try to make the minutes work, just because their staff is stretched so thin in the building. The coaches are stretched really thin in supporting teachers. The teachers themselves teaching multiple grade levels. And so, you know, I think I've been more convinced than ever just listening to some of those challenges that that's not fair to kids to have, you know, and it's not, again, it has nothing to do with adults who've given up on kids, because I think that school is fully committed to giving middle schoolers what they need, but their hands are tied. There's only so much you can do with 140 kids in a middle school, and middle schools students deserve so much more than that. It's not a souped-up elementary, and sometimes when I go there, I do feel like they're just souped-up elementary school students, or they're treated like, and the kids will tell you that too. I mean, I know they're not happy about their school closing, but I've often heard like they feel
Their grades closing.
Yep, they're grade school kids.
Yeah, exactly. Their grades are closing, but they talk about how they feel like
Yeah.
they don't have the step up to being more independent, you know. And I know from 5th to 6th grade, kids really do love that idea that they gain, you know, independence and a little more autonomy.
that, that I know for many of the SALT students, that is, objectively, they would tell you that. So I just want to point that out. I mean, this, and I very much trust Beth Ann's judgment, who I know has been back and forth on this, around, because I think she's torn as somebody who, again, she's right here, so she can speak for herself, but is somebody who I think is, who has put a tremendous amount of time, and we got that email today from a staff member, who I think is right. The school they're on the move as a school. There has been some really positive things from the new staff that have been hired there. Those are people that I would love to bring here, or that Gavin will have the opportunity to add here, or Beth Ann can keep at her own, at her school. So I don't want to diminish that. This is not because it's a failing school or an underperforming school. It's just what I think gives us the best chance of serving middle schoolers, for years to come.
I think when we move on to a discussion of grade configuration of K5, K6, 6, whatever, I'm going to remember everything you just said about what middle schools, 8th, 6th graders need that 5th graders don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's sort of on my side of that argument.
Feel free. I'll have a different argument for you then.
I gotta get that tape.
Can we, I'm sorry. It's your meeting. I was just wondering, I'm interested in people's opinions about what a transition would look like specifically the educators around the table, what a 3-year transition or a phase out. I was sort of doing the math. The teachers want to do. They just want to. Everyone. There was a lot of let's rip the Band-Aid off. A lot of the parents, even the ones who disagreed, some of them were like, let's rip the Band-Aid off too. If you're going to do it, just do it. So I'm just curious what folks who are in the business think about the two options.
I'll just offer that when we had the same discussion around the last school closure in the district, I think there was some conversation we had about, was there different ways to do this? Could we delay it for a year? Could we, think about particular grades? And what I found in my experience is that these are Salem Public School students. When we diffused them and they went to each school, they immediately became a part of that school community. And it was better for the students to integrate them that way than to give them the false experience that their school still exists or their grade configuration still exists when it clearly doesn't. I get the desire that some folks may have for folks to finish where they start, but I firmly just believe that kids are going to be okay. The research pans out on that. It is about what supports you provide, and I think how I would envision the transition is a lot of engagement with the families leading up to the end of the school year, a lot of engagement with the students, opportunity for crosswalk where kids are leading kids, people get opportunities to see the programs, gain exposure, and really adopt it as their school community well before they come to school in August. And so I think that those are the things that led to a successful transition for the students at the Bowditch to all the different schools across the district. So from my view, I don't necessarily see a benefit to staggering, just given the scale of the school. If we staggered for the seventh graders as an example, so they could finish in the 8th, they'd be in a middle school of a size of a specialized program. And I don't know if that's, I don't think that would be a great experience for kids, given that they'll know that their peers are all in one building. They're having a very similar and equitable educational experience. So I would oppose an idea of like a staggered phase in. I think we're at a phase where we've had the experience of a closure that when we diffused the school, all the indicators said that was the right thing to do. We shouldn't have gone with any of the other options that were on the table. And that's our prerogative as a committee and for the district. We have to put the onus on them for the transition to be super tight.
I look at it as if we don't move everybody at once, the kids that are there for another year, it's almost mean to just stay there another year now, worrying for a whole year about making that move, you know? I mean, they're in the 6th grade, so we leave them there for the 7th. But now they already know that in another year, they're gonna go, you know, let's just get it over with for them. Instead of having them, you know, spending another year's time worrying about what it will be like when it happens. You know, just let it happen, you know, as opposed to me, that's sort of like torture.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the challenge with any sort of staggering, if we do decide to proceed with this, the challenge with staggering is sort of threefold. The first being that families who know the transfer process, they may make those choices for their children, and who remains are either those who really would benefit from a very small experience, which, as I've mentioned a couple of times, I think having a conversation around what those smaller experiences within Collins could look like for families and like kind of help with that particular transition. The second being that, you know, 40 kids in an 8th grade, they don't need 33% less staffing than, or 66% in this case, 66% less staffing. They really need probably like maybe half to 3/4 of it. Like it's not an even trade. So you end up with a really challenging staffing model to try and do, particularly for your students with disabilities and your multilingual learners, because you're never going to end up with just the right number for a single staff member. Like you're going to end up with split staff, and it's really messy. I said threefold, I can't remember the third fold, but and I think the third being just it is really challenging for students to know that they're sort of that like staggered out group. That's not, it may feel like the softer thing to do, but it's not a softer thing to do. Like it's really hard for kids to sit in that type of model. That being said, I've been all over the map on this, and the kids' surveys and all of the different results, what I'm really struggling with, I think, Steve, is what I raised at the first discussion of this, which is I think when families are raising particular concerns about Collins, there's a bucket of families who, yes, are responding to sort of like the myths around Collins and the inaccuracies, but there is another bucket, and this is what I've been talking about consistently, is there is a bucket of people who know their kids very well and know that they need a smaller experience. You know, I think of like my own loved ones, like I have, you know, like there are many of us who do better in a smaller environment. And my issue has always been not that exists at Solensdal, but that families are making choices for their kids so early, and that smaller model isn't available to all at middle school. That's sort of the challenge for me around this. So for me to really fully be able to understand this massive shift and to make sure we're doing good and right by kids, I really do need to kind of see it more clearly articulated for families of like, this is how we can be able to provide that, and sort of not just based on staffing recommendations, but also like where is the family input and the kid input and all of that type of thing on what type of middle school experience, you know, like we have that available to us at the high school. We have alternative places that are, and I'm not suggesting outside things. I'm not even suggesting staff make recommendations, but families and kids to be able to say, I hear what you're telling me, I see the perception difference, I understand you're telling me that Collins looks like this, and I am telling you that's not what I want for my kiddo, that's not what my kiddo wants for their middle school experience for whatever reason. What exists for them? And then the complicating factor for me on top of this is we have a potential amount of non-significant amount of change, not an insignificant amount of change, there we go, it's too many, coming our way for the middle school model. Like, if we're switching grade configurations, we have these dual language middle school conversations coming around that, like, all of these things in flux, it is very challenging to sort of say, what are we doing about this tiny little puzzle piece without knowing the fuller picture of what does, you know, is the pilot continuing to be a pilot? Are we looking at it eventually for 6, 7, 8? Like, what are all of those types of things? What is the grade level configuration? Because if we're gonna possibly switch, Mary, I'm not saying we're going to, but if we're switching to like a 7 to 12 and a 6, that changes, you know, I don't want to make massive decisions to make another massive reversal of decisions. So that, I think, in the larger context, that's sort of what my holdup is I do feel like most kids will be best served by this move, even though it's a challenge and it is going to be really hard and kids and families are going to feel it. But inside the larger situation, that's, I think, what I'm really,
Yeah.
really struggling with.
Can I just make a comment about the switches, the changes around grade configuration? The building, like, that is 7 years out. So I just, like, because I was thinking the same thing, Beth Ann and I were kind of chatting, we were talking about it a little bit during one of the forums, and it is a pretty big runway to, for whatever happens,
But if you're enrolling a kindergartner or a first grader or a second grader and you're looking down, like, you've made a choice for your kid's in first or second grade. These two decisions, they do line up, like where they're going to, do you see what I'm saying? Like, that does impact, no, it doesn't impact our current middle schoolers or even our fifth graders, but that conversation around that, it's sort of the double whammy of like, we're doing this, actually we're doing that instead, kind of thing, that I think it makes it really challenging
because
for.
I think I'm just not understanding what you're saying. So
It's like a family that chooses the K-8.
because it's good. I mean, I just think that's I think I have a problem with that premise from the jump.
Mhm.
Like, that you're making decisions for your 4-year-old, because you're planning this out, and it's like, you have no idea what the best environment is for them when they're 12.
But that doesn't negate the fact that people do make choices, like whether or not
Right.
that's the thing where they're going to be most successful. I think a lot of people make choices for their kiddos at very young ages based on maybe their own personal experiences, their
Right.
neighbors' experiences, but it doesn't make it any less of a valid or personal choice. Like,
I think I just have a hard time with the idea that, and this is probably because I was a parent in the district when you couldn't get into salts. So I have a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that everybody in the community talks about the fact like salts was actually a viable choice for most of the community, because it wasn't. And so now you can get into salts if you want to send your child to middle school there, or if you want to send your child to, do they have a tough waiting, do they have a waiting list? Like, if salts is your first choice, can you get in kindergarten?
For kindergarten, there wasn't after the first round, there was after the second batch.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this goes back to the conversation about choice in general. It's like, it's, this sort of, it's a philosophical discussion that we've been having at different points, but having a K-8 school in the district is not choice. That's a lottery, and it's no different than going to Saks, in my opinion. It's just not choice.
I would argue that we have many, many, many cases like that for all of our, that's not a
Oh,
salts
yeah.
issue, that's a school choice
100%.
thing. That
I
exists with
totally
the
agree.
dual language that exists with
Yeah.
Carleton.
Well,
that
we have a
exists-
different situation with dual language in that it is more open, but Carleton, I think, I think Carleton's completely inequitable, right? If you get in, your kids can start school early. If you don't get in, go pay for nursery
I guess I'm
school
just
for
not
another
understanding how that
6
relates
months.
to the salt and salt conversation, but that is, to
Yeah.
me at least, an argument of, we're having all of these very large conversations, including school choice, including grade level configuration.
Mhm.
So where does this situate in that larger conversation?
Mhm.
And regardless of that, people are making choices now, and have for the past couple of years, whose kids are impacted by future conversations, siblings, like, all of those things. Like, to me, it feels very hard to sort of make a one-off decision, knowing there are other dominoes, or knowing there are other conversations that we are having.
Can I just, on that, I mean, my response to that, I've been asked that question about the configuration. I think I see my responsibility as making the recommendation that is in the best interest of kids right now. So whether we make a change in configuration of 7 to 12 or 9 to 12, even if the decision is to go to a 7-12, that's still minimum 5 years away. It could be longer, I mean, from what they say. And so I don't feel comfortable waiting for 5 more years.
I'm not suggesting that. I think what I'm trying to say is when you have, I think there's a level of transparency around the number of decisions and the types of things that I know that we
That's
as a
fair,
body
yeah.
have
Yeah.
had these conversations,
Mhm.
and they have been held at publicly posted meetings. We haven't had, like, I think that there are a lot of people who maybe hadn't heard or hadn't seen. What I don't want it to feel like is this like ripple effect of like, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and it
Yeah,
feels like this
I got it.
instability
I got it.
rather than
Yep.
thoughtful decision making. Because not right now, but historically, we have had this reputation of doing like sort of like the left
Yeah.
hand and the right hand not knowing what's going on, and I don't want people to feel like that is what is happening to them, and I think that this has the potential to do
Yeah.
that.
I understand, now I understand what you're
I
saying.
agree with Amanda on the coherence piece. I think that a lot of these folks aren't going to pick up on the larger strategic conversations we're having. And so that'll be important for us to be able to answer those questions. I know in the past, we've done things like FAQs. We've really tried to like line up when we're making big decisions about how that relates to their strategic plan. Steve, I trust that you've taken that feedback to heart and you'll come back to us to make sure that, again, you're telling us how you're engaging with those families to understand like the total board of what's happening within the district so that they understand that there is coherence and we're making these decisions. The one piece that I agree with Amanda on that I think we do need to figure out is, as we think about potential transitions, the 6th and the 7th graders, that would be 6th and 7th graders next year. Obviously the 8th grade, we've gone from pilot to this is the 8th grade model. I think some conversations about what does transition into 6th and 7th look like in particular, what are the things that we learned from the pilot years that can go backwards, if you will, to ensure that the students are feeling like there's some voice and choice, that there's some participation on their part, and that the families are understanding like what is the whole middle school experience. So I would just ask that as we think about this, like I think we do need to have, or at least committee members are going to need to have like that information at our fingertips about we know what the model is at the 8th grade, the new model. We're not a pilot anymore. But I think those two transitions in particular, that's where things could get really sensitive. And if there are opportunities, I know, Steve, we've talked for the last 3 years, like that's why we got to a pilot, that the middle school experience that all students were having was not great. That's how we landed at that small scale pilot that then evolved to where it is now. I'm in favor of exploration about what we can be doing for kids that what we're doing right now at Collins still isn't working for them. And the same is true for kids at Salt. So, to the extent that we can get creative about what we learned from the pilot, how we might be able to do that in pockets or in cohorts for those other 2 grades, I'd be open to having conversations about that.
So what is the plan right now? Is there a plan about the other 2 grades? I mean, what's maybe not even the plan, because we can have a goal without a plan. Like, is the goal that the pilot will go down to the 7 and the 6?
Yeah, resources willing, right? We would love to expand to, and Gavin, you can jump in on this too, to the 7th and 6th grade. Already there are what they call tastes of the 8th grade experience that are already fused
Trickling
down in 6th and 7th. And to a lot of what you just asked Amanda or mentioned, we've learned a lot about what middle schoolers want through the pilot, through that experience. And not for nothing, I mean, just like a part of what's informed this decision is, I know Salts is a smaller school, but the data is pretty compelling. The kids are more disengaged there than they are at the larger school. And I do think some of that is through intentional work that Collins has done to make their school feel smaller. The work that the pilot has done, or previously the pilot, but the 8th grade experience, and that really Gavin and his leadership team have done to create, clusters that actually represent something, because they did in your time, but they certainly hadn't after. And then the work that they've done building out models like Connect for Success, which we probably haven't done a lot. We haven't shared that with the school committee, but we replicated after work that happened at Salem High, where a group of kids who were at risk are getting additional support, at the school. So there's multiple, and maybe that's something we can have Gavin come back and talk more about, but like the work that they are doing here to make the school feel smaller, and I shouldn't say smaller, but more connected, I do think is working, because every data metric you look at regarding engagement, when the mayor talked about chronic absenteeism, some of the panorama survey, the discipline data, suggests that kids right now here at middle school are feeling more connected to their school. I wouldn't say we've arrived, But there are, and I agree with you, Amanda, I do think we have, and Gavin and I have talked recently, we do have more work to do to create additional pathways within the school. But I think the work has already begun, and I do feel like our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders here do feel like they belong here more. I wouldn't say it's perfect, and we haven't gotten to where we want to be, but the groundwork is done. We made a conscious decision. We had talked about when was the right time to start recommending this phase out of the Salem middle school grades, and we didn't think a year ago that Collins was ready, because they had a lot was in flux, and the new leadership team had come in. Now, after a year, now going into year 2, we think by year 3, which will be next year, that they'll be ready to introduce 140 new kids here.
Can I ask another question related to a specific grade at Salem? If this move happens next school year, this current year's 7th graders at Salem will go to Collins will leave Salem, go to Collins for 1 year, and then go to immediately up to Salem High School. So they'll have 2 transitions of buildings in the course of just 2 school years. Will there be specialized attention, especially their 9th grade year for the students? Like, that seems like a lot.
I think that's part of, once we know what the plan is, I think we should really be specific about the needs of the different groups. Because I do think that the group that's going to, somebody used the word angry before, but the group that's going to, be most, I think, this is going to be the hardest on is the current 7th graders. And so I do think they require, and Beth Ann and I have talked about that already, they seem to be the ones that are most frustrated by it, because they'll have a middle school experience here of one year if the choice is for them to come all at once. And so I do think it needs to be differentiated depending on the group coming.
That's the same as the Bowditch played out.
Yeah,
the 8th
right.
grade.
You were speaking of the 8th graders, yeah.
But I think that I think the answer to your question is more, we've got to look at it with a little differentiation. I don't think everybody that comes for just the 8th and then jumps to the 9th, so there's the 2 transitions. Some students, that's, basically a walk in the park because of the structure that they, just who they are and who their supports are, and and other kids, that is going to be a big thing. So I don't think it's a question of will the 9th grade provide ongoing supports. I think we should qualify that with the 9th grade provide them to the ones that need it, as opposed to assuming that everybody needs it.
Yeah, we're just understanding that.
So just,
48 kids.
Because I remember in high school, my best friend, we all had to go to a guidance counselor, when as freshmen, and she went before me by a few days. We were walking home, and I said, well, what was it like? She said, I think there's something wrong with me. And I said, why? And I couldn't tell him any problems I had. I didn't have anything to say that was a problem, and I'm worried about it. And he kept asking, and so now I'm worried that I'm not worried. I mean, seriously implanted in her head that if you don't have something wrong that you got to talk with the counselor about, then there's something wrong, And I always wanted to not overdo with kids on that. Can we ask Gavin? I know you're talking about. See if you're going to talk with him
Can I
and
ask
stuff.
if they can join us up here since there's
Yeah.
an open seat?
Is there going to be public comment at the 7 o'clock
The 7th club.
Yes.
on this?
On any.
And anything.
Like the
transition, or is the 1-year transition? or is
Gavin,
that
for the
not-
members of the public, can you just come join us up here?
I mean, can Beth Ann come up so she's not the
Beth
only
Ann,
one
too.
left?
I was asking for both.
Oh, so I didn't understand what you were asking.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, Gavin, if somebody said, what are the 2 things you most are focused on right now that you need to decide or get resources or,
Well, one of the things we're doing around, I don't know if you're familiar with MyCap, like My Career and academic planning.
So guidance program.
It's basically an extension of SEL through 6th through 8th grade. So if you think it's K through 5 is SEL, like the Castle 5, Castle 6. and then think of MyCap going into middle school to high school. So like we're building out that scope and sequence, which is really differentiated, individualized for individual students. So thinking about the 8th graders who come over for 1 year, like they're gonna, a lot of that work in 8th grade is about building that in their understanding, in their career interests, and their personal inventories. So I think like it's kind of already built into the scope and sequence we want to create for 8th graders. So like next year is a really great year to do it, even if it's just 1 year, because there's a lot of work and attention to building out those skills beyond, 8th grade into 9th grade, and beyond. So it's kind of and that should be built out. Right now we're building it. Next year it's going to go into effect. So in terms of the 8th grade experience and what we're learning from it, what we're building is those inventory and those activities. So that's kind of what the taste of the 8th grade experience is building out those intentional activities for students. So just kind of to your question around that 1 year transition, that's something that we're already thinking about for all students.
When we're talking about having a smaller experience for some kids, what are you thinking as we're talking about that?
I think it's always, in a larger school, I mean, it's still only, 630 students or so. It's always about that authentic relationship with students, and adults. And so we spend a lot of time with our clusters, which is our, our core 4 and pathway teachers. So there's about 100 students in a cluster, about like really understanding who they are and that relationship building. So we do a lot of activities like what students don't have a personal connection, and what are the activities we're going to do with them so that they feel that sense of belonging. And so like we did that the last early release, so in cluster meetings. So they really spent a lot of time and like learning who those students are, those 100 students within that cluster, and that's kind of how we really build that smaller communities within the larger school. There's some other activities as well, but that's probably the most intentional way we do it.
And what would you need from us to have, as Amanda was pointing out, even smaller? Or would you?
I mean, it's tough for me to say, because every student and every class is so different, but it's really about, knowing who those kids are. We're very fortunate with like City Connects and the data we collect from pre-K on, and using that data to understand who the students are. So when they come up in 5th grade, we already have so much data on those students, the interventions, the student supports, what they're doing outside of school that we can kind of already take into our 6th grade classroom. So we have the same connection even though they're coming in already in middle school over, or if they do. We'll have a ton of data to look through and have those conversations. So I think there's already some really good systems and supports ready to go. It's just having the time to work through that.
Will you need resources? I'm thinking now, put the budget hat on, Collins has a lot of supports, but if we do this, are there, positions or supports that you're already thinking, boy, I'm going to need that? And you don't need to answer the question, but I guess I'm just rhetorically saying, should we all be thinking about that too? I mean, I don't know.
I think I think, we're very fortunate we're resource rich to meet the needs of our students. So I think, just making sure that the core teachers come over with the students, I think we're going to be in really good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Building out the SSAs, the student success advisors, and using them at capacity has a good ratio of student support, those student coaches in the building. So maintaining that is definitely something that we hope could continue, next year as well.
I think too, I think one thing I think we should be careful about when we're having this conversation is we're kind of voicing the assumption that students at SALTS need smaller environments and students at Collins do not. And there are plenty of students at Collins Middle School who really benefit from small group experiences that are provided in this middle school right now. So, and the same thing for SALTS. There are kids who don't necessarily need a small environment and really thrive in a bigger environment. So this is just about kids. This is not about the current spaces that exist. Kids within each of those benefit from a variety of different ways of learning. So it's when we're or community and classroom experiences. So I don't think it's necessarily the kids who are transitioning. It's all the kids, which it was to your point, that seems like a very effective model to be able to say, okay, we've got these 100 kids, let's really look at every single one of them and think about what each one of those kids needs, which is a lot of the work that we're doing in our elementary schools.
Right, which is what I was saying about like the inequitable opportunity to have access to. But I think when you're talking about perception, and perception is people's lived reality of it, regardless of whether other people find it to be true or not true. In order to help people understand what is available at Collins and what types of it, you have to explicitly sort of show that small, like, that there are, like, it can't just be, these are the types of things we're providing at Collins and everybody's getting with it. Like, you have to really, like, carefully articulate it and almost brand it as well in a way, not in like a punchy marketing sense, but like, there will be people, regardless of what neighbors may share about their current experiences at Collins or anything like that, while it only appears that there is one choice for middle school, there will always sort of be the assumption that that's not going to be the right spot for my kid. And so we really have to think really carefully. And again, I agree, it's not just for kids who are making this transition, but without a second option at middle school that's actually fully separate, it becomes really easy to assume that. And so I think just kind of trying to figure out how do you best articulate that and clarify that and market it a little bit so that people understand exactly what kids are getting.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
give it a name.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sometimes parents will calm down if you take all that data you're talking about and the information, and you can support the kid, and all really some parents need to be accepting of that and be willing to give that a try, is to say, oh, we have this, you know, that provides that, as opposed to, we have 100 kids and we talk about them, you know, and we know what that means, but to say, yeah, well, we have this and we have this, and just make them real to people by, and I'm not saying like make up pretend programs, but qualify what they are, so that what the supports are, so that they can see students are getting different things that they need, you know, by talking about them as a thing, as opposed to, oh, we provide supports, quote,
And
you know.
that's like, I didn't fully understand what you were saying before, but now I do. And and I think I think branding, like the branding and marketing of it, like it's crass when you're talking about education, but it's true.
But it's
you know,
true,
to
yeah.
be able to, you know, if families pull their kids out of the schools, and this is what a lot of parents are like, everybody's going to flee the school district, all 140 of these kids, which is not true, first of all. But second of all, if people choose to go somewhere else because they feel really deeply that, like, okay, Saks is going to provide something that this school district cannot provide, you know, I think we can all respect that. But if parents really are struggling with this decision based on information, like a limited set of information that is not totally accurate, that's on us, that we didn't get out and provide as much information, education, real sort of touch points for families and kids throughout the experience, assuming that we have those things in place.
But there are two things at play. There is the I'm working off of perhaps inaccurate or limited information, which absolutely, and both options are on us. Like, both of these situations are on us. That one has a totally different solution. But if you think about the number of students we hear who tell us about their experiences at Salem High, and then they go to Salem Proper, New Liberty, and they talk about how that was their place for them, that made a huge difference. Part of the reason why K-8 schools became so popular is because we were really bad at doing middle school. Like, we, as like an American public education, like, we were really bad at doing middle school. So as we learned more about Mary's favorite age group, these funky little middle schoolers, there's still merit to a K-8. K-8 does have great outcomes, but it's not because it's inherently better. It's just that we have known more about how to manage these like particularities of K-5 and then K-8 as like when we tack them on. But we have gotten better and better at doing middle school, generally speaking. And so for the folks who are going to be convinced that way, you need to communicate that information. But there are still kids who, like, it's just not going to be the right spot for them. And we should help them understand where their spot is going to be. And I just feel very nervous about not having those extra landing spots. Not saying that Saltonstall is that currently, but that we should have that for families who truly know that their kids do need a different environment. And I feel,
Can I ask you-
yeah.
So do you mean
Can I
like,
ask a question?
so like adding like a would adding a middle school component to Salem Prep and Salem Academy be that kind of alternative? I mean, we do have
I mean, I
middle
personally
schoolers
would
that want
rather
them.
see it be here. Just, I think we have to be able to clearly articulate what is the same and what is different. And I would almost want to hear what Steve's thoughts are. I would prefer to see it here. I think that people who are good at educating middle schoolers are good at educating middle
I was just gonna
schoolers.
ask you if you thought it had to be a separate location.
I don't think so, but I think you have to be able to clearly articulate, like, maybe there are less classroom transitions, or you know what I mean? Like, there are certain things about
Yeah.
middle school that
Okay.
are really hard for kids,
Yep.
for particular types of kids, and kind of being able to identify those things and build in, like, structures and supports that, like, families feel like they have some control and agency over. That's part of what, I don't know if you've heard this, I hear it sometimes like, oh, they really appreciate that their kids do have less transitions.
Mhm.
But for some kids, it makes high school really hard for them.
Yeah.
And so kind of figuring out the differentiation of like who really can benefit from these gradual releases into more transitions as they get ready to scale up to high school versus like the release. I don't know. That's sort of what I'm trying to articulate is like how, like what do we do in those particular circumstances? And I don't feel comfortable not having those.
So my question is, are you concerned about not having a second middle school? Like, we have 5, 6 elementary schools that then feed into a middle school and a high school. Like, we only have one high school aside from New
We have
Liberty
3 high
and
schools.
Prep. But most of the kids go to the high school.
You're also not
Is
choicing
it
them in the
unrealistic to
same way.
think that they
It's not
could
the
go to
same.
the one middle school?
Well, so yeah, the high school, I would say there's 2 choices for high school, because you really, Salem Prep is a unique experience. But can you just ask your question again?
So, like-
I'm not sure I'm supposed to answer it, but.
No, it's fine. It's just a question, like,
Yeah.
so we have, there's always transitions, right? So they're
Right.
gonna transition to either Collins or stay at Salts, because not a lot of kids transition into Salts,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
So not a lot of kids are going there, or they go to the academy, which is separate. So is it unrealistic to have one middle school versus 2? Like, you only have one high school, we're only going to one high school.
I think a lot of communities only have one middle school.
Right.
I do hear Amanda's point.
Right.
And what I think she's saying, and we've talked about this, like, we've talked about that there aren't, like, it's more about pathways, whether they're separate or not, for kids that need something different. And unfortunately, what I often is the case is like it's special education or regular education, and there's nothing in between, right?
Right.
And I do think there's, I would concur that that is something we should think about building.
There's lots of stuff in between, you know,
Yeah, there's some.
for years, the middle school here had an alternative program that was not special ed. It was, we ran it on campus for some time, and then we
But
ran
don't
it
have
off
that.
campus.
We don't have that now.
No, but I'm saying to talk about, like, for kids who are in, you know, just to plan it, what are the, she's
Yeah.
asking what, you know. Or you have a regular, that self-contained classroom that is not a special program, but for kids who need a little more. I think the idea of middle school is going to the prep in those places. That to me is too soon to move a kid that age to like the prep. Not the prep, I'm sorry, to New Liberty.
But we tried that a couple of years ago, and it wasn't super successful.
It doesn't work. The alternative program that worked the best was a 1-year. Our commitment from the school with the parent was, we really think this is what your child needs to sort of get their act together. And within 1 year, they have to come back. And so it was not like a dead end, but it was a chance to regroup and to catch up academically and stuff. But there are lots of ways to do that and still keep them within the confines, the community of the school.
Do you want to describe Connect a little bit?
Yeah, so we have, I wouldn't call it a program, but it's basically a pathway that runs during our pathway block. So students either have it twice a week or once a week, depending on how we're tiered and based on their support. So it could be behavioral, social emotional, academic, it could be attendance, you know, whatever. So there's a variety of needs, and So they go, instead of going to a traditional pathway or specialist, they go to that room where they, work on, MyCap, SEL stuff, progress monitoring, goal setting, kind of, and so Brad Malone is the one that kind of is the point person for the program. And so...
Is he still doing it?
Yeah, he does it. So, and students, sometimes they might need it during the day, right? So they're having a tough day, they're having tough transitioning to classes, something happened over the weekend. They can access that classroom throughout the day, even though they might not be scheduled in it. So it doesn't take away from academic time. They still go to the core academics just like everybody else. But through that pathway block, they're able to go there and access that. So kind of differentiate depending on their needs.
Mm-hmm.
But they could spend more of their day in there if they needed,
Absolutely,
if
yeah.
they were having a tough time.
All depends on what they
Yeah.
need in that moment,
And,
right?
and there's a caseload of kids.
There's a caseload. So we've only done it the last 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. And we use the City Connects kind of tiering system to tell who might be eligible and referred to that program through the SST process. And this is kind of how we've kind of identified students. So
Is this different? This is not the same as the kids who are coming out of hospitalization?
that's the Hawthorne program. Yeah, so it is different.
Do
There
they-
is some
Do they still
overlap.
do that here? Because I know
We still-
for a
yep,
while
we
you
do
were
have
doing the
yep.
Hawthorne.
We have a Hawthorne tutor who does have a very small caseload. Students I think maybe only 2 students have accessed it this year. But there is a lot of crossover, as everything is in schools, through the tiered systems and support. So some students who may have been hospitalized, sometimes they're already in the TIDES program, our therapeutic program, and they might already be in Connect for Success. So, what is that point person? What is that setting as they transition from a hospitalization? It all depends on, what they need.
So we already have different kinds of pathways. We can add to those pathways to, for maybe, kids who don't have maybe really difficult circumstances that they're dealing with or need to work out, in order to be, their best selves in school. As Amanda was saying, like maybe just kids who need a slower entrance into middle school. And I was thinking about the pilot program when it first started, when you were saying that because at first my brain was like, well, everybody's going to go for the smaller, I want to do this step. But I remember trying to tell my daughter that we were going to put her in the lottery to be in the pilot when it first started. And she said, oh, no. Like, I want big, I want to be in the cafeteria, I want to be with everybody. And it was like that, sort of I was just underestimating like how powerful middle schoolers can be with what they want. But I do like that idea of being able to clearly define different pathways for kids. Even if we have the majority of kids are taking this particular pathway, just like the majority of our kids go to Salem High, we do have these particular pathways, and it doesn't have to be kids. It's not, we maybe have a pathway for kids who are in crisis, a pathway for kids who have learning challenges in specific areas, and maybe pathways for kids who just, as a lot of these parents are concerned about, just really do need the benefit of a slower transition, smaller groups, and maybe build so that by the time they get to high school, they're prepared and ready.
I know that the focus for you, Steve, has been on what kids at SALTs are not getting. And I haven't had a chance to go to the forums and to hear all the parent feedback. Obviously, we have the surveys, and those are super helpful. I guess the things that I would be curious about, like the last time we went through this in the body during my service, we talked a lot about how we would try to honor the boutage, and that's a completely different situation because it was a school closure versus this is potential grade closures. But I guess I'm wondering, are there things about the SALT install experience that you all are learning about that, like, you're thinking this should be a part of our transition to help bring the kids back? Are there things that, Beth Ann, you've been doing with your middle schoolers that have been good to share with Gavin that you might want to think about, like, this might give the kids a sense of familiarity, might give the sense of, like, of school pride, something that they can also share with other kids? Like, when I was in 6th grade, I did X, Y, or Z. Are there, like, lessons learned from the SALT's middle school programs that you're thinking about, or?
There is the Thanksgiving stew.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll let Beth Ann comment on that for a sec, but I do, one of the things I heard from people in this process is it will be important for us to hear from the SALT's kids if this decision is made about what are some of the things that they feel like they want to bring with them to the school. And so I think, I would pledge that we go down and have that conversation with them if this decision is made so that we can ensure that they retain some of those things that are most important. I will say, in the last 2 years, a lot of work has been done. Like, a lot of the SALTS kids are participating in the Collins activities already, like the play, like sports, like the after-school programs. I mean, that's a credit to these two leaders, because it wasn't always like that. And SALTS didn't want to do their, Collins wanted to do their thing, SALTS did their thing, and there wasn't necessarily, talking about after your time.
No, during my time.
Okay,
There
during
was
your time.
absolutely
Okay.
no.
I don't know exactly when, but there wasn't always both. I think both leaders are playing well together and making sure the kids have access to what they offer. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Beth Ann, about like things that the kids are going to want to see.
So I don't think there's a whole lot that we do at SALTS that they don't do here at Collins. I know our Stew Day is huge, so that is something that I don't know that would be able to replicate here. But we also have the ability where we have our 8th and 7th graders going down to our elementary school. And so they have that connection with our younger kids, which you don't have here because there aren't younger kids here. However, I know when I was at Carleton and Chelsea started the pilot program, those pilot kids came to Carleton. And it was great.
Yeah, they could go
And
to-
so
they
they
could
could
go
go
to
to
Salem,
all of the elementary schools and have that still be part of, being those mentors for those younger kids. It's really something that the SALTS kids really like. And we see a different side of a kid when they go and they're with those younger kids. And so having them as sort of mentors in the building has been really nice for the kids in the older grades. And I think that's really important that we keep doing that. So when they all come to Collins, maybe they can go out into all of the 6 elementary schools and make that, part of something that they do.
No, that's profound, and thank you for sharing that piece, because I do know that piece of having the responsibility helps kids. It helped me when my younger brother got here to Collins. I feel like I really hit my stride in 8th grade because I felt like I had to be a good model for him. So, I do think that there's merit to that particular piece about the mentoring. So I'd love to make sure, I know we're having a conversation about a policy we haven't voted on yet, but if that has to be a part of the conversation, is how do we create those types of opportunities for the kids, because we know that was super important. And then baking into the process of the transition, like that listening session for like what are those artifacts, what are those programs, what are those activities that the students believe are super important, doing the same for the families, giving that opportunity so that we can really blend 2 school communities, which I think that was why we had the success we did when we diffused Bowditch across the district, is that we gave folks that space and those opportunities. So that really helped illuminate for me. And it's okay that you didn't have everything. Those 2 things I think were important enough.
And I think those are things that we should be doing regardless, when, it strengthens us as a district. It helps to undermine some of the myths that people hear out on the soccer field or wherever they're hearing them, having actual kids in front of them, and being able to communicate, oh, this is what it will be like when you get up to Collins. When I did the Amazing Shake, and the football team came down to Bates, you would have thought it was the Patriots, and those kids were mouths hanging open. And so we don't take those opportunities enough in the district to create community among our kids and our schools. So I think that would be wonderful.
Steve, some of the data that you've talked about in terms of like the panorama perception data, the chronic absenteeism, there's something else I can't think of. Discipline. Has that been disaggregated at all into subgroups? And I was also thinking grades is my first question.
You mean middle school grades or
Yeah,
specifically the?
middle school grades.
Yeah, I mean, the academic data is disaggregated by grade. The other data,
I have a
and
rough estimate of the attendance in my head.
we can get the attendance pretty easily by grade.
I was just curious,
And even the end of this one.
Panorama does to an extent. I don't know.
I think they do band though. I don't know if I can get it by grade.
they do it by grade.
I think so.
Okay. I have to look at my dashboards, but yes, yeah, we could
The
get
raw
it by.
data expert anyways, which I've had a chance to.
Yeah,
poke
you've
around.
actually, yeah. I
Only
can-
the elementary. And I was also wondering too about subgroup, because I think some of the conversation around like who's being served and by which like that is, I think, an important consideration as well. And then I was also wondering if the student survey responses, are these 3 columns that we have access to, are those the only columns, or do we have like by grade level or the ability to get by grade? Because obviously like with 43 students identifying that they would be upset by the move, I'm curious, are they mostly 7th graders whose 8th grade would be
It didn't
significantly
include, it
impacted?
didn't include 7th graders, right, Beth Ann, that survey?
It did.
Oh, it did.
It didn't take our 8th graders this year.
Oh, I thought you told me it didn't include.
Why,
I thought it was just 1 grade.
No, we did, I don't know how many are in there. I know I've gotten
80
more.
survey, 80
Yeah.
or 79 responses, so it's more than a grade. And I was wondering,
That's
I thought
3
it
of our
was fifth,
classes
sixth.
out of the 6, because we wanted 5th, 6th, and 7th to take it.
I thought you said the 7th wasn't in there.
They
That's
hadn't,
what I wrote.
yeah, the 7th haven't taken it, well, they hadn't. I think they have since.
Okay, I
And
can get you,
look.
I can get you an update, but I don't know if we can tell if what grade level they were.
I didn't ask.
No.
okay, that's fine. I was mostly just curious because I think it kind of helps with understanding like the student, because if the majority of 5th graders are saying, like, I don't really care, or like, that's important information versus like 7th grade, there's a huge emotional component to it. And I don't know, like, because this looked at least like an auto-generated right from the form, so it could be updating as students are taking them, I don't know, but that, I was just curious, because I think
Well,
that's important.
One thing to note though is 50% of the 6th graders are brand new to the school.
Right.
Are we?
That,
New to the school.
Right.
So, yeah.
Thank
I
you.
can say, when we went around to the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders to tell them that the school could potentially move to Collins, our 7th graders were the ones that were really, really upset.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
Be-
figured.
Yeah. The 5th graders kind of, they were 5th graders, right? Oh, okay. And our 6th graders, I think they were still kind of feeling out the school. The 7th graders were very upset.
Last thing I was wondering about, it's actually to do with the 50% attrition rate that we saw with that grade. I am curious if, Beth Ann, if you could talk a little bit about the impact that has had. I'm thinking in particular, one of the challenges with Bowditch's attrition rate was the significantly disproportionate increase in particularly English learners and newcomers and new arrivals. I'm wondering, 1, if you see that, and 2, if that's caused an impact in terms of how you're able to provide services, given like if it's an unanticipated increase or a jagged increase.
So yes, we've seen a ton of MLs, especially in the last month and a half this year. But we also get a lot of special ed students in the older grades who want a smaller setting and think a smaller school would be better for their kids on IEPs. So we got a lot of kids on IEPs in our 6th grade, or a lot of kids who were going through the SST process that it was now to a point where they were saying they need to be tested. And so we got a lot of those this year and last year, actually.
I also think what's happened in talking to the PIC is historically, Salts has not had a lot of openings for middle school. But now, when a new family comes and they're looking to register in 6th, 7th, or 8th, there are openings at both schools, although Collins was pretty full in 8th grade, so a lot of the 8th graders are going to Salts. But the parents look at the location, and they are picking what's closer to their home. Yeah, and so I think that's a phenomenon, because before there never was the number of openings, but now they're picking Salts when they arrive, because we've all seen the density map. That's where our families live. They're going to choose that's where they're opting to go.
Yeah, this is, I think, sort of when you have such significant difference in models, this is such a huge challenge with school choice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I won't say anymore because I could
Yeah, don't
run the
get me
rest of the
started
meeting,
on
but I
school
don't
choice
like that.
either.
To me, that's just, we see it at the elementary school, but it's particularly problematic at this middle school level to have such fundamentally different programs when you have school choice, because then you have families, if there aren't enough seats at Collins, which is the larger school with the more typical middle school experience, like in terms of student expectation, family expectation, all of that, it's a mess.
And, I mean, this is hard for people to wrap their heads around, but in most of the state, middle schoolers don't get bused to school. I mean, we're not required to bus middle schoolers or high schoolers to school. And so we offer this in Salem, and it's tricky, you know, and it's not all about cost. It is really expensive to operate, you know, as many buses as we do, but it's just logistically really tricky to do that, particularly when our families are choosing schools based on the fact that they might be able to get transportation.
Any other questions or thoughts? Still have a regular committee meeting
27 minutes.
well, tonight, but also we're talking about taking this up again at the 18th.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when we vote, we would be would there be like one vote on moving the middle school? And then another on the grade configuration of that? Not the grade configuration, but the you know, process, yeah. Or are we voting on, we're moving the kids, and it's up to administration how? Like, who makes, are we supposed to make two decisions, or are we making the one decision, and then the, you know, Steve and Kate and Gavin and, you know, whoever?
Just the one decision. But the last time, the way that we handled the school closure was, that we created a document that had things that we wanted to make sure were covered within
Yeah.
the closure. I don't necessarily think we need to do that this time around.
No.
But we can ask the district to come back to us after the vote with what your transition plan, your
Yeah.
transition presentation, rather than creating a resolution with.
Right, but
here's
we
the 10
don't
things we
make
want to
that
see.
plan.
We don't.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on
that's
what
a-
we will eventually.
We do to a certain extent, because if we're saying
Yeah.
a certain school, a certain grade needs to be in a different building on a certain date, that's a decision that.
Well, see, that's my question. I mean, the motion could be that we close the middle school grades of the Salt and Straw at the discretion of, you know, central, you know, how you ever phrase it. You could phrase it so that we're saying, yes, we think those kids should be pulled out of there and moved over here, but we're not including in that how. And we're leaving.
Yeah, the way it was framed was that the school committee would make that decision.
Okay, so that's what I'm
That's
asking.
how it was framed, but, I mean, you can punt that back, but I you know, I think that was one thing in the recommendation. I was recommending the closure of the middle school.
Yeah.
And then asking for the school committee to decide on whether.
On how.
Yeah, on how, right.
Okay,
That's
and
how
I'm
it was
not, I'm
set
not
up.
looking to punt it back. I just
Yeah.
wanted to understand what we're exactly voting on.
Yeah.
With Bowdish, we voted on a specific
We voted on a document that,
that
again, had those
outlined it,
10.
not like first this, then these.
10 things that we wanted to make sure happened within the
Right.
transition. And that was the school closure versus this is
You're right.
grade reconfiguration. And that was, I think, to cover ourselves also on the accountability side with DESI too. But yeah, I think this is a little different than that.
Yeah, I don't have, this is not a loaded question. I just am asking what is.
And we took several months to close Bowditch. It took us 3 months. Whereas this decision.
Oh, I know.
So this was brought to us a month ago.
Yeah.
And then even the 18th, that's not enough time, I don't think, to come up with the 10.
I mean,
And
it's
the- and
not
the
as
plan.
though we haven't been discussing it. I don't want people in Salem to think that this was sort of, I mean, we knew that Salts was struggling.
Oh.
And so that conversation has been going on for a bit.
I want to be clear, what I'm talking about is a plan. So
Okay.
we took 3 months to put a plan together, whereas this would giving ourselves 2 weeks to put a plan together to vote
Oh,
on the
I
same
understand what
night,
you're saying.
that doesn't seem like a lot of time if we're gonna lock ourselves into something.
I don't think that we should be, all of the specifics around how the students will be brought into the school, what their pathways will be, what kind of supports they'll have in the classrooms. I don't feel this committee should be putting that into a motion and voting on. What we are voting on is whether or not the middle school grade should continue at Salem Stall, and if not, should the transition be
Right.
made in 1 year or over a period of multiple years?
Mhm.
And from that point, I would have comfort with the administration in the schools could determine that. But we've been having conversations about
But
this.
I'm happy also to bring a transition document.
I think some
show the
of
committee.
the questions that
Yeah.
have come up tonight would be helpful, related to transportation, related to the points that have
Yeah.
been raised.
Right, and the small settings or whatever, that's all
Yeah.
not,
Mhm.
not anything that we would be making.
Some of this-
No, but it contributes to whether you support it or not.
Oh, yeah, right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Some of this, I would imagine, at some point will get then redirected to subcommittees. So if we're talking about transportation, will that be a policy amendment if we make some changes, even if it's just for a year? So I
would
think
have
then,
to be,
yeah,
wouldn't
there are
Needs
going to
change
be.
the policy, yeah.
Yeah, so there will be, and we'll have to discuss whether or not we want to change the policy. I mean, I have a lot of reservations,
Right.
a lot,
Me too.
about
So what
making
else?
changes.
But then, on this piece on the policy front, we don't have to change the policy per se.
Mhm.
The superintendent can act in the absence of a
Right,
policy.
right.
And the second piece being, when we take the vote, that's, part of it is the execution and implementation.
Mhm.
So, if that's named as a tenet of your plan, he doesn't necessarily have to go out, because the school committee has approved the closure. He can't do the closure without figuring out this transportation side of things.
Mhm.
So I would caution us against touching the policy
Mhm.
and saying that that's a part of the grade closure plan, is that for 1 year,
Yeah.
the school committee approved whatever.
Yeah,
on
and
the
so that would
transportation.
just be part of the kind of feedback, or like, whatever the plan is, like the progress plan over the next 6 months or however, and to get us to where we need to be if we take this vote, right? So the vote's happened, now we have this runway. That would be part of it, is the superintendent coming to us and say, this is my recommendation about
Yes.
transportation, we don't need to take a vote on it, and if we want to push back, we could do that.
That's right. Or we
Okay.
could vote to affirm it too. It doesn't-
Yeah.
Either way is fine.
I would fully expect that if we decide to approve this change, that this will need to be an agenda item for our regular committee meetings for a
Yeah.
few months, at least as a report of the superintendent,
Yeah.
or superintendent's report,
Yeah.
status of the planning around this.
Mhm. Agreed.
What else, just a second, like to brainstorm, what other components or aspects of this plan would involve a policy, not a policy, but a subcommittee? I mean, is there anything that would go to curriculum? Is there anything that would go to finance, is the transportation really the only one right now on the,
I mean, I'm happy not to take it.
I can't think of anything.
okay. I mean, I'm not thinking of anything, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to plan ahead to how the hell we do this.
It could be a
we
transition
do
task
it,
force,
you know.
but that could be separate from,
Say what?
we could have a transition task force that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
these
I like
folks
that
can
idea,
Put
actually.
together, it doesn't have to be a school committee function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that exist with Bowditch?
There was a team that was working on the transition, but it wasn't named as like a task force. I think we were.
It's an ad hoc naming
Naming committee, that was the thing. that we're not-
Naming.
We're not gonna get it to
Let's-
that. That's, in terms of the.
Don't even
It
discuss
didn't lead anywhere. So,
Rise above board.
my larger point being, I think you can put together a task force and let us know who's on that transition team.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we're not touching the naming stuff. AJ was on that one, actually. I'm surprised you didn't react to that. Very good. Move to rise and report.
Well, I just have I'm sorry, I have another question. So what is our time frame, what's our timeline here? Like, do we
Right,
have,
if not the 18th.
We're on for the 18th.
so the 18th is what?
No,
November 18th.
the vote on the,
November school.
that's why I'm asking
That's
tonight.
the decision for the vote.
What's,
Of this month?
Yes.
yeah,
I thought we said we were not voting on the 18th.
not tonight,
I heard not tonight.
the
And
18th.
that by
And
the
I heard you
18th,
say in 2 weeks was not enough time.
to put together the transition plan and 10 points and all these other things. I don't think that that's enough time. I think that's why we want a few meetings to get updates, not to lock ourselves into something that Steve put together in 2
So,
weeks.
I don't know that I would feel, unless there were a certain amount of information that could be provided by the 18, I wouldn't feel comfortable voting without some aspects of the transition plan in place.
Agreed on that. I just mean, I don't think Steve's gonna have everything. I think he's gonna answer the follow-ups that I know he was taking copious notes on today and bring us something to review that's related to the transition, but I don't think he's gonna, at least not my expectation, that he comes in to tell us who's on the transition committee, you know, what's
Right.
what are the specific programs, you know.
Right, no, I'm not expecting that. I guess
There will be a mini plan.
So,
do you feel comfortable voting on a mini plan?
On a mini plan on
Yeah.
that night?
well, are
As
we,
in, like, taking a formal position on the plan versus
Right.
just voting on a decision to close?
do we
a
need
few
to have a
graves?
cow before the 18th? And decide if we're, but no, even a short one, to decide if we are ready. I mean, rather than having a thing that's scheduled to be on the agenda to be a vote, and then we sit there and talk about how we're not ready. I mean, that's,
The only thing that I'm not comfortable, like, I'm comfortable, I mean, I just can be transparent about this. I find it a very compelling argument to transition the middle school out. I don't think it serves kids well to continue to have the middle school there, so I'm comfortable making that vote. Rip the Band-Aid off, do it slowly, that's one that I would like to have a little, like, I'm not quite sure where you all would be in that scenario. That I feel like needs a little more conversation. I'm comfortable making the decision to transition this middle school out with the expectation that we're going to get a plan. So I feel comfortable doing without a mini plan or a full plan. I would be comfortable doing that with the expectation that we're going to have a lot of conversations around what that is.
I'm comfortable about everything you just said about not comfortable yet, except I think if we make the vote, we do need to, at the same time, decide on are we going to rip the Band-Aid or not? Because that's the angst of the community.
Yes.
And to dwindle that out, for another, meeting, and another one while we get it to, but all the other information, I agree we wait and let Steve provide us some of that. But I don't see anything any more information we would get that would change my mind on whether we rip the Band-Aid or not.
You mean shifting
Shifting
the middle
everybody,
school out? Yeah.
or dragging them over in, 2 years.
I would just be willing to entertain a more, the teacher's comments were very compelling to me, which is that my initial thought was that if the vote was to get the middle school out of Salts, my initial thought was a slow phase out would be the right choice for kids. And then even the parents who disagree with the position a lot of them were like, let's just do it or don't do it. And the teachers seem to be in that same camp. So, I mean, if there is another argument for a phase out, I am certainly, I'm willing to entertain that because all I have are notes, that are feedback notes. But, so that's one conversation that I would want to have.
When?
We will,
I don't know.
I think in the interest of time, so that they can set up for the 7 o'clock meeting.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap this up. But we will follow up with members individually about timing.
And what they need in front of them, right?
Yeah, Steve, if you could follow up with people as far as what do you need to see. Grab the material. We have a meeting in 15 minutes. We have the report ready by then.
He's working on it.
I'll rise and report.
Horizon report.
Second.
It's a special meeting. It's not a committee.
Oh, thank goodness.
So is there a motion to adjourn?
Do you rescind?
Yes.
I do, I withdraw. No,
What?
no, something else.
Yes.
Now, are you gonna make a
I have
motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn, yeah,
Second,
second.
under discussion, all in favor?
I'll second.
We have a,
You have a remote still? I think she's not, I don't think she's there.
I don't think she's on.
she's there.
She
She
lives
lives
there.
there. She raised her hand virtually.
I'm here. I was saying yes
All right,
to
Member
adjourn.
Miranda.
Yes.
Member Cornell.
Yes.
Member Cruz.
Yes.
Member Manning.
Yes.
Member Hoffman. Member Campbell.
You say my name every time, you know my name.
Nice.
Yes, Mary.